It's Combine Week. Matt Williamson has touched down in Indianapolis. He's been there for a day. What has he learned? All the trade chatter, and we're talking quarterbacks, getting some intel on what's going to happen in the 2025 NFL Draft on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love our everydayers. Thanks for stopping in. Make sure you're subscribed and just hit that thumbs up. Let us know you stopped by. You can always drop a comment on YouTube as well and get involved in this week's Combine mailbag episode. Get those questions in at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL on the YouTube comments. And of course, make sure you subscribe while you're there on YouTube or anywhere you are listening to the audio version of this podcast. Matt, how are things in Indianapolis? We've already been asked by our listeners how many cocktails you've had, shrimp or otherwise, so far in Indianapolis. And are you rubbing elbows? Have you had any conversations with any drunk GMs that you can let us in on?
Yeah, I hung it up a little early my first evening. I had to get up early in Pittsburgh, drove all day. So last night wasn't insane. Anticipating more tonight. We're going out to a really good dinner, start off with some martinis and see how the evening goes from there. But it's been a really good day. I'm on the air 10 to noon every day and then from 2 to 5 every day. So 5 hours total. And they're nice enough to give me a little lunch break. And I sneak back here and do a couple things in my room, as you can see. Not the best environment. But yeah, I mean, first off, right off the bat, I've run into quite a few Locked On hosts, Locked On Titans, Locked On Raiders, Locked On Steelers. I've rubbed elbows with all those guys, gave some fist bumps to those dudes. And I'm sure there's others that I have not yet run into that I will. Radio Row is a buzz. And, you know, our Steelers section, one of the things we really concentrate on while we're here is grabbing good guests. And I grabbed Greg Cosell. I think he kind of speaks for himself. I grabbed Trevor Sikkema, the Pro Football Focus's lead draft analyst, who does really, really good work.
A Locked On alum, by the way, Trevor Sikkema.
Oh, yeah. So even more Locked On representation. Yeah. Love it. And one of the biggest things that happens on Tuesday is most of the GMs have some sort of interaction with the media. You know, so for example, Omar Khan met with all the local media by himself, and then he came over to our table and sat with us for a whole segment, you know, which was great. You know, he said things along the lines of, we're planning on getting the quarterback signed before free agency, which to me implied it's probably Wilson or Fields, but maybe it's Cousins or Stafford or Rodgers or somebody that's not going to become a UFA.
Okay.
He also said something like, kind of let it slip. He's like, well, the wide receiver we sign in free agency, like, well, I guess they're going to sign a wide receiver in free agency, you know. So all the GMs had a lot of that going on today. So that's kind of the buzz right now, and it's good stuff. Yeah.
So before the Steelers are on the clock at 21, based on your conversations with the Steelers GM Omar Khan, they will already have a veteran wide receiver and a starting quarterback.
Yep, and I think the starting quarterback will even be before the free agency buzzer goes off, so you know what kind of receivers to get, you know?
Yes. Interesting. Okay.
Yep.
And I would assume, which I assume for a lot of teams, just because you sign a quarterback or sign a wide receiver, that's for right now. That's for week one. That doesn't mean you're still not going to take one in the NFL draft as well.
Oh, sure. I think that's 100% true, but that's step one. And I do think there's going to be a lot of receiver movement. Some of the other things, I think Stafford could be had, you know, just some early talks. But one thing, you know, just talking about the guests we had on our show, Greg Cosell really implied that he thinks Ward is basically light years above Sanders. And he doesn't do rankings per se, but he even kind of implied he has Shuck above Sanders as well, who also opted out not to throw. So there's some, as there always is early in the combine, there's some incoming rookie quarterback news too,
So Shuck has the hottest stock I've ever heard of for someone just all of a sudden before the combine. Was he at the Senior Bowl, Shuck?
Yes.
He
is shining, yeah.
Maybe that's where some of it comes from. Because I was like, why is everyone all of a sudden talking about Shuck? And I know you were talking about him last week, and I hear Greg Cosell talking him up. And
I didn't know Greg saw it. So as soon as I brought it up, he's like, oh, that's my guy. We kind of looked at each other like, oh, that's both our guys. So, pretty interesting stuff. But he seems to think Ward is clearly number one, at least by his rankings, which I tend to start to drift towards as well.
So Shedeur Sanders not throwing at the combine. Ward is also not throwing, right? Or is he actually going to work out?
It's been announced. I mean, I think it came out today that Sanders isn't going to work out and Abdul Carter is not going to work out, which Carter probably has nothing to do but lose. I mean,
yeah. I mean, what's the worst? So what's the worst? You end up second in the draft instead of first.
Right. Maybe you end up third or whatever.
Yeah. And so I get it with Abdul Carter, although I want to see what those testing numbers will be, and I'm sure he'll do it at the combine unless it's a Marvin Harrison Jr. situation. But here's the thing: Marvin Harrison Jr. might not have helped future prospects because
good point.
It's like his stock was so cemented, he didn't work out at all. But then it's like, okay, maybe he wasn't quite the athlete is being built. Not that he was a bad rookie or that you think he's not going to have a good career, but it's like, okay. Maybe there's a reason.
Neighbors blows up, and it's like, well, maybe number two's nipping on your heels all of a sudden. What about those Georgia guys goes crazy this week or whatever,
Brian
and I would like to get a height and weight on Carter. I think he looks a little small to me.
Well, he'll weigh in, right? He just won't run.
I assume he'll bod it up. I mean, these guys are here; they're doing a lot of other stuff.
That would be a red flag if he's like, nah, I'm not even going to weigh. I'm not even
right.
Yeah, that would be.
I think he's doing all those things.
Yeah, okay. That would be interesting if Ward throws and Shedeur Sanders does not throw, because I was under the impression that neither was going to work out or neither was going to throw, at least.
I'm not certain on Ward yet.
Yeah, and it's kind of become that situation where it's like, okay, if you're not going to do it here and you're healthy, you're kind of telling us something. And
I think so too. I mean, because really your pro day, it's almost like that test that you pass. It's like pass fail. Like if you do well at your pro day, I'm not going to add anything to your stock. But if you look crappy at your pro day, I'm going to hurt your stock. But you have to do it at some point. Like you better do well at your pro day. You're throwing your guys. I mean, throw to Travis Hunter or whatever,
And maybe throwing, it's an odd environment, and you would have the potential to not look that good. But consensus is already that Ward's ahead of Sanders. So unless you're afraid of falling behind quarterback 3, where there's supposed to be a big gap, why wouldn't you compete if you're Sanders? And maybe Ward doesn't have the best day and you throw well, because that's, it's an opportunity for you to throw down and maybe gain some recognition from teams and from scouts. And it's interesting. If Ward throws and Sanders doesn't, that is interesting, because
I mean, Sanders went to East West and didn't do anything, and we didn't think much of it. But he could have went to the Senior Bowl, didn't do anything. Now he's in the combine, didn't do anything.
Even at the East West, like that doesn't even make sense.
I guess he was meeting with some teams that were picking high in the draft, and that's an odd environment, though.
Yeah.
So here's my Tyler Shuck tinfoil hat theory, though.
Okay.
If you look alphabetically, do you know what quarterback comes after Sanders? The 6'5" Shuck with the big old arm. To quote Greg Cosell, he's like, Sanders is not a power thrower. He's an accurate thrower. He's not a power thrower. Very well said. And then the 6'5" dude walks out there and starts ripping Matthew Stafford balls. It's like, well, I don't look so great,
Yeah, it's interesting. There's Cam Ward, and he'll probably be the first receiver or the first quarterback selected. And there's, Ted McMillan could be a star from this class potentially, or Abdul Carter, and of course Travis Hunter, and a number of names. But in 5 years, we're going to look back on this, and it's the Tyler Shuck draft.
Maybe when he's 32 or whatever.
He's actually not that old for how long he's been in college.
No, he's going to be a 26-year-old rookie in September. I think he turns 20. He's 25 at the moment.
He's 25, it's older, but 7 years ago. I guess that adds up. Yeah, because we've already seen so many super seniors that were 6-year guys. What's one more year, especially with
it's not Whedon.
In fact, for Shuck, I mean, it's huge at the combine because he's had some injury problems, right? So if he
that's the concerns.
Yeah. If he passes the medical bill of health and comes out and has the biggest arm in any of the quarterbacks throwing, that's massive for his stock.
Massive. Right? He's 6'5". I mean, he's a big human being where Sanders isn't, or, and frankly, I probably should have mentioned that. Like, several people I talked to said, everyone knows who Shuck is in the NFL, maybe sneaking up on us, but I mean, they know who he is. But their only worries are medical, which should get answered in the next couple days, So if we're hearing bad buzz, it's like, I'm worried about all the slew of injuries. If you start hearing top 50 buzz, or even better, probably got a good bill of health, and look out.
Yeah, and with quarterbacks, the more they play in college, the better they've turned out to be in the NFL in a lot of cases too. So that much of a negative for a quarterback who can still play an easy 10 years if he actually is a legit guy. So Tyler Shuck, interesting name for sure to watch the rest of the weekend at the combine in Indianapolis. More trade chatter.
Super quick. I'm going to tell a quick story about Omar Khan too, because I asked him this direct question, not about these quarterbacks, but I just said, boy, the scouting world's changed so much, Omar, right? With all these 6-year and transfers and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, it's a great question. And obviously Shuck is like the poster boy for this, but Nix, Daniels, Penix, all these guys that look like it did them good. And he had a great point. He's like, my scouting staff, Coach Tomlin, myself, from here, we're going to pro days. But we can't forget when we go to a pro day to ask about the guy that used to be here, that transferred out of Auburn and went to Oregon. You know what I mean? Like, don't just ask about the guys participating. Ask about Bo Nix last year when you go to Auburn. I'm like,
interesting.
I guess you should, right? So you're gaining a lot more information.
It's a great point. All right, more from Williamson's early buzz at the scouting combine in Indianapolis. And we'll talk a little bit more about the quarterbacks and what Adam Schefter had to say about the Cleveland Browns potentially being in the mix for a QB at number 2 in the NFL draft next. So that's consensus already. Cam Ward, QB1, Shedeur Sanders, probably QB2, QB3 up in the air. Maybe it's Tyler Shuck, big week for him. But what's interesting is, and I haven't mocked, for some reason, for a team that needs a quarterback, there's not a lot of quarterback at number 2 in mock drafts for whatever reason. Cam Ward kind of goes 1 and 3 in mock drafts, and you skip over the Cleveland Browns. And obviously the Browns have a weird situation at quarterback. But was it Schefter at the combine today said that I
read that just before we went on here, that he strongly feels that quarterback is a play number 2 to the Browns, which I think is such a mistake where they're at. And a lot of people it's not Schefter, it's not documented, but a lot of people seem to be thinking the Titans would like to get out of 1. Now, are these two things overlapping? Better get ahead of the Browns and come take our pick from the Titans. We know everybody lies, but
right.
I mean, Schefter's pretty dialed in.
That's the first place my mind goes, is that it's lying season. So who's telling who and what do they have to gain? I found it interesting. So everything coming out of Indy, or everything coming out of Tennessee, is that the Titans are going to draft a quarterback. No, they want to trade out. They're doing their work on both quarterbacks. They really love Abdul Carter. Nobody's mentioning Travis Hunter's name, which makes me think Travis Hunter is the guy they want. That's the way. Why is all these reports and not naming something else that should be named? It's like, okay, maybe he's not in consideration at all, but maybe he is the guy they want, and they want to put all the rest of the stuff out there because they want to trade down 2 spots and still get Travis Hunter at number 3 potentially.
And you remember when the Titans GM went to the podium for the first time, the new GM, he said, we are not going to pass on a special player.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Carter's really, really good, but playing both positions is pretty special. I'm not sure there's much more special in this class than Hunter. I'm not even saying he's the best but that's pretty special.
Yeah, the uniqueness of it. Like when we again, I was making a joke about this being the Tyler Shuck draft when we look back in 5 years. You might look back and be like, man, how did you draft Sam Bowie ahead of Michael Jordan? You know what I mean?
And where the Planet Size guy's awesome.
Right, yeah. So that's a really interesting one there. If you were to do a mock draft today, Cam Ward 2 to the Browns.
If I wasn't allowed trades, I feel stronger every day, and maybe by Friday I'll be like, boy, that was a dumb thing to say Tuesday. But I think Cam Ward will be the first pick in the draft.
Okay.
I mean, history shows it's a quarterback.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know who's going to take him. Are the Giants going to come up? Are the Jets going to be aggressive?
Yeah, I feel like it's the
Raiders.
Because the Giants are in such a good place to, if you believe, if you're working on the idea that you and I are working right now, Matt, that you believe that there's two blue chippers and then there's the top quarterback in Ward. The Giants don't have to do anything and they get one of those. And you're going to trade like a future first, which might be the number one pick in next year's draft if things go south, to go get a quarterback and play a rookie quarterback all year. That doesn't.
But I also think they're the only ones on the hot seat. Like Tennessee is a new GM, a second-year head coach. The Raiders aren't on the hot seat. You know, the Giants better do something. Maybe it's sign Sam Darnold or trade for Stafford or whatever, but they better do something. They don't have any leash.
What do head coach and GM Brian Dable and Joe Shane care about next year's first-round pick if they're not employed?
Not one bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point. The other name that's out there a lot that's attached to the New York Giants is a potential Matthew Stafford trade. Have you heard anything on that front while you're in Indy?
I don't think it's smoke. I definitely get the feeling that they will listen to offers, or that's a real thing. You know, he wants $50 million or whatever. Last year, they apparently had a conversation with him, kind of told him, let's revisit this now, you know, in real time now. And I don't think they want to give him the money he wants. And I also think that they must have some other plan in place. You know, I mean, I get the impression they kind of like Jimmy G, fine, but I can't imagine that's the only move. It keeps bringing me back to, like, do they think Cousins just needs a year removed, or I want to get my hands on Sam Darnold or something along those lines? Because you can't.
Aaron Rodgers. You got
maybe Rodgers. Maybe Rodgers. If I'm going to go with an old guy, I'm going to go with Rodgers and take the cash or the trade value back for Stafford too. You know, give me both.
The one thing I'm not buying is that they're like, oh, we're going to trade Stafford and we're just going to roll with Jimmy. That can't. That's not
that. They're too aggressive of an organization.
Right.
No way.
Aaron Rodgers, I'd probably rank him this way. If Stafford gets traded, it's either Darnold gets signed immediately or is almost part of the same deal, because I believe Matthew Stafford and Sam Darnold have the same agent.
Oh, I didn't know that part. Okay.
That agent is probably talking to the same teams about both quarterbacks.
Fair. Right.
One is a free agent to be, might get franchise tagged, and the other has been allowed to seek trade. So they can definitely legally and, you know, and publicly talk with teams about Matthew Stafford and a potential trade and what that would look like. So I wonder how much money is being talked about, what the contract is, what the asking price is, and then also potentially doing a deal for Sam Darnold to have him replace Stafford in LA, because there's no better place if you're Sam Darnold either, right? If you're Sam Darnold and you're like, Matthew Stafford's getting traded, I want to go to the Rams and work with Sean McVay, right? Is there a better spot for Sam Darnold?
I don't think so. I mean, I wonder if that's like a backroom deal that's already done.
Yeah. And it's,
you know, like we'll get 10 years younger quarterback or whatever it is, a little bit cheaper. The foundation of our team is pretty young. Puka, the D-line, our old guys are on their way out. Donald's gone. Kupp's going to be gone. Let's get everyone on the same generation, you know?
So I would rank Darnold as the most likely in LA by a lot. If Stafford, I still don't think Stafford's going to get traded, but man, crazier things have happened in the NFL.
That's the best landing spot Sam could ask for.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
I mean, that's number one.
It's LA. It's his hometown. It's
I didn't think of that. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, unless the Vikings want to trade McCarthy and just stay and roll back and throw Justin Jefferson.
Which
that's not happening.
Yeah.
No.
Sam Darnold's going, and JJ.
If he had choices of any potential spot, the Rams are number one.
Mm-hmm. And then, you know, Aaron Rodgers would probably be a second if Darnold gets like a crazy offer, because the Rams wouldn't just go pay. The idea for the Rams is that they actually get Darnold, who's younger, for less than they're going to pay Stafford on an extension.
Right. And you pick up a second round pick or whatever too. You a little bit of draft capital when you trade Stafford. Yeah.
It would make no sense for the Rams if they just end up giving Donald the same amount of money they're going to give Stafford anyway, because they get worse at quarterback in the short term.
You do get younger, but right. I mean, I think you buy 10 years, pick up $10 million in cap space, and a second and fifth round pick to make the swap.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand it, as young as you are. And if it blows up in your face, go get another one. I mean, they're an odd organization. They're such an aggressive organization. They'll trade first round picks if they have to. They'll get rid of Goff if they have to. They're not going to sit on their hands. I know that.
Fascinating team, Los Angeles Rams in 2025 if that Stafford trade goes through. And then then the Giants are sitting there hoping that a team's going to come up and get a quarterback. But if you're the Giants, this could pay off.
The trade for Stafford.
Right. So it pays off for you on the back end because you can sit at 3. And if
Carter or Sanders or Carter's or Hunter.
Yeah, you get Carter or Hunter. Or if the quarterback's there, now you're in the power position to trade out.
Yeah. It'd be nice to be sitting at 3. Like example, if the Patriots were sitting at 3, you'd be glorious. But sitting at 4 for New England, the top 3 guys are going to be gone in some way, shape, or form.
And something's going to happen in front of them. Right.
Right. So the Giants plus Stafford sitting at 3 are kind of in that same boat. Like, I'm going to get one of these 3 or someone's going to call
me. Yep. And at least get some of your picks back, even if it's just short trade up, even if it's just the Raiders or the Jets coming up.
That might be the cost of Stafford.
Mm-hmm.
Move from 3 to 8 and get Stafford basically to move back.
And you know what? Let's pause for a second. Taking it one step further, the team, the completely unrelated team that is probably rooting the hardest for Matthew Stafford to get traded to the New York Giants, and we'll talk about some other trade chatter in a contract that was recently done.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. So the team, and we'll get off the quarterbacks and we'll get off the top of the draft conversation here, but the team that is probably rooting for it the most, Matt, would be the Las Vegas Raiders. If indeed everybody in the league sees it the same way, Cam Ward is the best quarterback in the draft. If you're the Raiders and you're sitting at 6, and it's really expensive to go up to 1 or 2, but if Stafford gets traded, and now Cam Ward is available at pick 3 and the Giants want out, you can get up to 3 a lot easier and a lot cheaper. And I probably would guess that the Giants would rather trade with the Raiders than with the Jets. If I had to guess, it might have to overpay for the other New York team to come up and get a quarterback from you. And so maybe that would
have doubts that the league, when it's all said and done, will look at Sanders in that light.
Well, that's what I'm saying is it would be for Ward. So that's a way.
Okay.
So that's the path for the Raiders to get their number 1 quarterback in the draft. If indeed everybody in the league, including the Raiders, looks at the quarterbacks this way, and that there's a big gap between Ward and Sanders, and Ward is clearly the prize, because otherwise it'd be probably too costly to get up to 1 if you're the Raiders, and potentially a team could still jump in front of you for Sanders, even if you liked him. That's what happened in my mock draft. I had the Jets jumping up in front of the Raiders to get Sanders in front of them. And that's even if you think that Sanders is worth a top 5 pick.
So I hate to keep bashing the guy, but I wonder if a dumb organization just overpays for Sanders. Browns, Giants, Jets,
I can't remember what podcast. It must have been one of the ESPN podcasts with Field Yates and it was Field Yates and Kuiper. And they were going over one of their mock drafts or something. And there was audio. There was like a video or social media clip of Sanders, Shedeur and Deion Sanders looking at like the TV where they're like, they had Shedeur Sanders going whatever pick. And they're like, oh, that's bull mess. No way. I ain't going. It was like number 6 or 7. It was like, I ain't going that late. It's going top, whatever. And they're like,
draft,
it was like blasphemous that Shedeur Sanders could have possibly go outside like the top 3 picks.
When it's all said and done, you might be lucky to be heading up there. Right.
So we'll see. Other trade chatter, Matt. I know there was a report today that Jonathan Allen, longtime Defensive tackle for the Washington Commanders could be available. I know they drafted Johnny Newton really high last year, and obviously I'd already paid Daron Payne. So those are the interior defensive tackles of the future for that football team. So Jonathan Allen is now available for trade for a team. He's got 1 year, $15 million left on his contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were 3 nuggets I kind of just got from today too. It sure sounds like Allen is available. These are just from like GM conversations. It sure sounds as though the Colts are going to have competition for Richardson at the quarterback position. And the way the Jets GM talked about Devontae Adams was basically, yeah, he's a Jet for now. Like one of those type of deals. So Richardson, Devontae, and Allen are 3 names I think that are kind of firming up what their future, or that they're going to be in the news right now. It's a bad year to try to trade a Jonathan Allen. Like we had Trevor Sikkema on just talking D tackles, and everyone we're going to have on is going to be raving about this D tackle class. And Allen's not cheap, and he's a really good player. I don't know if that's going to yield a ton. It might yield a 3rd round pick or something like that. So
I think it'd be less. It might be like a 5th round pick, and
I like him. But
yeah, he's a good player, but yeah, any team that might think, man, 3rd round pick, I can get a really good player in the 3rd round at defensive tackle. Potentially. That's
super cheap, and right.
It's cheap, right? And Jonathan Allen's been pretty healthy most of his career, but he was banged up last year.
Not the best year to shop him,
right? And he's in his 30s now, and last year of his contract, so you got to either restructure or figure something else out and get a new contract done because it's a 1-year rental. That might be just a situation, and that's what happens a lot of these situations. It's like, hey, so and so is available for trade, and then 3 weeks later, so and so was cut, and so maybe that's the situation with Jonathan Allen too.
And I think that's going to happen to Debo. I think that's going to happen to Kirk. I think that's going to happen to Kupp, where they've been shopped for a while, and it sounds like they're probably going to get cut.
That reminds me, one of our listeners said, "What about Jonathan Allen for Debo? Need on both sides for the for those."
I kind of like it, yeah.
And if both would kind of be late round picks or end up getting cut anyway, Jonathan Allen for Debo Samuel. There we go. I think we got that.
Would you do it?
Yes. I don't love the contract, and the 49ers take a hit trading Debo.
Yeah, I say trading him isn't great, right?
I might just say, go to the draft. But the Niners have enough need at tackle where they might do that deal and still draft a 2nd round defensive tackle.
Sure. That's a nice start.
And I think that's
back to the rotation you want.
Yeah, and we're going to see some really minor moves done before free agency, teams locking up some of their own guys, some veteran players.
Tons of that's going to happen. That's what everyone, all these little deals and cuts, and tons of that's going to happen soon.
And if a team trades for Jonathan Allen, again, that's not a long-term move. That's like, okay, we have a guy. We don't have to draft. We're not stuck in this position, right? That's what free agency is all about. Free agency is for need. Drafts is for the best player. Draft is for 3 years from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. Free agency is for 2025. We need a starter at this position. So you don't hamstring yourself into, you must draft this position in the draft. And that's where you start to get into some trouble. So just because your team does something at a position, we started the show talking about the Steelers. Just because the Steelers sign a quarterback doesn't mean that's their quarterback for the next decade. Just because they're signing Amari Cooper or Keenan Allen doesn't mean you're not going to draft. It's not going to change your plans at wide receiver at all. You're not done just because you added one veteran player.
Like say the Bengals trade for Allen. Well, they absolutely should draft a defensive tackle in a rich defensive tackle draft too. That's the step one to rebuilding a terrible defense,
Last nugget I have here is from Ian Rappaport earlier on Tuesday. The Bills and wide receiver Khalil Shakir have agreed to terms on a 4-year contract extension worth up to $60.2 million, including $32 million guaranteed at signing, which is an interesting deal because what we're seeing when the salary cap goes up and what happens is rookie contracts stay low, and then the top of the league contracts get astronomically higher, and then it's created this gap of like no middle class at multiple positions, and we're seeing that at wide receiver and quarterback, I think, more than any other. So I actually like seeing a middle-class contract being done for a guy who's a good player, deserves to be paid, and he got a nice little contract here, but it's not like, oh, we got to overpay him or we're going to cut him in 2 years because it's going to be a ridiculous contract that's backloaded. So good on the Bills, good on Shakir. They got a deal done for a guy that might see somewhere near the end of his contract if he plays like he does, but it's not some massive contract either.
this screams value to me as fast as as contracts are going up and the cap is going up. And I know Nico Collins is a superior player to Shedeur, obviously, but like right about 1 year ago, Texans signed Collins to like $20 million a year. And then free agency comes and all the guys worse than him are getting 25, 26, but he's a mid-round pick that Shaquille's family's doing cartwheels right now. Big party at the Shedeur house. This is the most money we've ever got, so it's
generational
wealth
move.
Right.
Yeah.
Mid-round pick and boom, I got 60 million coming to me probably, great. And that's a smart move by the Bills. He's a really good player.
Well, that's the buzz from day one of the Combine in Indianapolis. Williamson's going to be there all week, and so we'll have tons of reports, no doubt, from there. We'll get to your questions as well in this week's Combine mailbag. Hit us up at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL or drop a question on the YouTube comments section. Make sure you subscribe while you're there and everywhere you listen to podcasts. And Matt and I back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.